Hi, it's Sunday, the 22nd of March, 2026, and welcome to this week's My Thoughts vlog. As always, unscripted and just my own thoughts and opinions, really. Well, this week, I'm going to do it on a question I've been asked, because it's quite a big question, but it's an important one. And I'll read the question out. I want to know, how does it feel, as a dad of two little boys and a disabled person, to find out last weekend that the MOD covered up what they knew about harm to people like your dad, and to know that the harm has unknowable consequences? Did you feel vindicated, unsettled, proud of your fight, sad, angry, etc.? That's quite a question, isn't it? And of course, this refers to the document that has been uncovered by Susie Boniface, the amazing journalist, which basically is kind of our smoking gun. It shows that the MOD were aware that fallout from the nuclear tests had contaminated the air, the land, the sea, the food, everything on Christmas Island, and that the men were swimming in the sea, drinking the water, eating the fish that had been in the water, and basically were living in that contamination. And they knew about it. They had done the studies, they did tests, and yeah, it was much, much higher than background radiation. And that's significant because in a lot of, and this is probably why they covered it up, in a lot of the war pensions, tribunals, and court cases, you had to prove that the radiation that you're exposed to was higher than natural background radiation. And of course, this report says it was much higher. So they covered it up, which is a disgrace. And it wasn't just covered up at the time of the test, it's been covered up over decades since, and there's been many opportunities for this document to have come to light. I mean, yeah, it's a disgrace. And the question's important that I've been asked, because kind of up until now I've been thinking of it more in terms of what this means for the community, and the nuclear test veterans as a whole. I hadn't actually sat down and thought about me, my dad, and my boys, and in relation to this revelation. And I suppose today is particularly poignant, as it would have been Dad's birthday today, 22nd of March. So yeah, it feels right actually to talk about it today. Now, I guess I'll take it in order. How do I feel about how what it means for my dad? And what it means is that I've always thought he was exposed to radiation. I've always thought, how could he not be? But this kind of proves it. And when you've got that kind of proof, it makes it feel kind of worse, because there was always that doubt that said he might have been okay, he might have escaped. But this kind of says you can't escape it. You can't escape fallout, can you? And where the report differs from my dad's situation was, it was Christmas Island that the report was situated at, where they did the grapple tests. And where Dad was Maralinga. Now, we haven't found any data for Maralinga. I suspect that might be because they stopped recording the data 2 weeks after they discovered the contamination at Christmas Island. They got rid of all the test sites, as in the testing sampling sites. Wonder why. But you can bet your bottom dollar, if grapple produced that kind of result, then Maralinga was arguably one of the most contaminated places on planet Earth at the time when my dad was there. They'd had 7 nuclear weapons detonations there. And then they did the minor trials, which, if you don't know, is basically radiation experiments with plutonium and beryllium and all these other really dangerous products. They called them the minor trials, which was a bit of a misnomer, really, because they were, the most polluting experiments ever done on planet Earth. They were simulating aircraft crashes carrying nuclear weapons to see, what would it take to make them pop, was my dad's phrase. and they were just basically blowing up plutonium and all these kind of things with conventional explosives, and looking at the dispersal of radiation and fallout and debris. And of course, it went everywhere, didn't it? So for the MOD to claim that there was no exposure, no danger at a place like Maralinga is nonsensical, because if it occurred at Christmas Island, it would have occurred there. It would have occurred at every site there was a nuclear weapons test, potentially even worse because of these dispersal experiments, because that was pure molten plutonium being sprayed into the atmosphere, and that is going to come down, and that's going to come down locally because it's heavier. So yeah, Dad was exposed. That's pretty much guaranteed now, and it makes you angry, because the tests at Christmas Island were done in 1957. My dad was there, Maralinga, a few years later. So those tests have already shown what happens, and that men would be harmed because they would be exposed to radiation. Yet they carried on. They carried on and on and on, right up to 1991, doing these radioactive experiments and detonations, knowing full well that men would be exposed. That's not the kind of government I want. One that knowingly puts its own servicemen in harm's way. I mean, you wouldn't test a rifle by shooting a group of your own troops, would you? It's just nonsense. So, Dad, I guess, was lucky in the fact that he survived to the age of 81. He sadly passed of Alzheimer's, but he did have a skin condition, which a dermatologist who we went to see asked if he'd spent his whole life in the tropics, because that was a lifetime's sun radiation damage he was seeing. And he just went, no. 1 year, Maralinga gave him a lifetime's worth of radiation damage from a hot country. So that arguably indicates Dad hadn't escaped it. It kind of confirms what I always thought. And then I suppose Dad was lucky. He did live to a good age. Right, but so many didn't. So what does it mean for me? Well, obviously, if Dad was exposed, radiation affects your DNA, causes genetic mutations, and you can see I'm visibly different. I've lived with that all my life and coped with what that means. And my main condition is undiagnosable. No one's managed to diagnose it, other than it's a genetic mutation. So, radiation damages DNA, which is genetic. I have a genetic condition. Doesn't take a genius, does it, to put two and two together? So that confirms that, in my mind, that my many conditions, were more than likely, as in 99.9%, caused by Dad's service with the radioactive experiments. And that again makes me angry, because they knew years before, as I mentioned earlier, they knew years before that the men were at risk. And the scientists had PPE, the servicemen didn't. What does that tell you about the attitude they had towards the servicemen? They were guinea pigs, they were cannon fodder, disposable, replaceable. Loads of servicemen. If some happened to get ill, we'd just ship a few more out. And that's kind of what happened. Disgraceful. So, yeah, it's caused my conditions. It's caused me to have a lifetime of living with disability, which perhaps was avoidable. But, That's the way the cookie crumbles, isn't it? You deal with the cards that you dealt. But when it comes to my boys, that's different, because I think I have passed down genetic damage to at least one of them because his teeth crumbled. And that is a known issue amongst the descendants of nuclear test veterans, crumbling teeth. And at the age of 2, you should not be going on the general anaesthetic to have 8 of your teeth removed. That's disgraceful. And that's painful to watch, really painful to watch as a dad. And it was painful for him as well. He suffered. It was horrible. And he's still got, issues around food, because his start to life and his start to eating was pain in his mouth. And that has a lasting effect. And that makes me sad, because I'm his dad. And, well, although it wasn't my fault, you could argue that perhaps Dad shouldn't have had kids, maybe I shouldn't have had kids, but we did. And, well, at the end of the day, it all boils down to the fact that the government and the AWE and the MOD could have prevented this damage and didn't. And they've been covering it up ever since. So, I don't know what's in store for my boys in the future. They may become ill, they may not be. I'm hoping to God that they don't. But this is why the cover-up needs dealing with at the highest level, because, they've got a life to lead. And to cover it up it's inhumane. Absolutely inhumane. They don't deserve it. I didn't serve up to join the military. My boys didn't. Yet we are the products of their recklessness and their experimentation. How is that fair? Does that deserve to go unaccounted for? No, it doesn't. Would acknowledging accountability now perhaps stop such reckless acts in the future? I believe it would. So my emotions around the new evidence are, vindicated is one of them, but it's anger at the cover-up. Real anger, because, well, to still deny and go off data that they know is flawed. Their report basically is debunked by this one, and they're still refusing to admit it. But that can only go on for so long. Well, have to, won't it? Because we are taking it further. So yeah, real anger at that. Sadness in the fact that had they acted on the initial findings and took more precautions, perhaps just stopped the tests, so many lives would have remained intact, unaffected. The servicemen wouldn't have got ill and died. Their descendants would not have had health problems. Their wives wouldn't have miscarried. So much pain and suffering could have been avoided. And to not acknowledge that is immoral. And you want a government based on morality, don't you? That cares for its people. We haven't got that at the minute. We haven't had it ever. Not since then. And the only way to prove that the government has a backbone, that the government has compassion, and the government believes in transparency and accountability is to deal with this. To look at the evidence that we've got and acknowledge what it says and what it means and deal with it. And one way they could do that is Hillsborough Law. Now, they are messing about with that. They've had it for months. They are still refusing to say what the problem is with the amendment that means the intelligence and security services are covered by the duty of candour. I mean, how long does it take them to make up their mind on that? They obviously know that they object to this amendment, so let's have the reason. But instead they've gone silent, and silence solves nothing. Silence won't help the nuclear test veterans. It won't help the Hillsborough Law coalition. So they need to get a backbone. They need to deal with Hillsborough Law. They need to deal with nuclear test veterans, because none of it is going away. And they're going to want our vote at some point, aren't they? They made promises to us. You know, they need to prove themselves to be a government worth voting for. But at the moment, that is slipping away. But anyway, that was a great question. And yeah, it made me think a lot. Really made me think. And that's probably why it's been such a long video, to be honest. So sorry about it if you're bored. And if you're still here, thanks. So ask me any further questions in the future, and I will answer them in a vlog, as I've just done now. Trying to think of anything else, because I normally do two things. There was a question, and I guess just a quick update on my baby son. Just over 2 weeks old now, doing really, really well. Happy and good little boy. My other son is brilliant with him, and the wife is recovering really well. So on that side of life, very happy. But we need to get, as a final thought, we need to get the government to deal with us, and deal with us properly. It's been too long. There's only so long they can sit on their hands, because the longer they sit on their hands, the worse this gets. Anyway, I'll stop rambling now. It's Sunday. Weather's okay. So whatever you're doing, have a great one, and I'll see you next week. Bye now.